During family dinner, my sister-in-law stood up, pointed at me, and said, "You're a cheater." Then she turned to my 7-year-old daughter and added, "You're not really ours. Robert isn't your dad." My husband didn't panic. He did this. 5 minutes later, they regretted everything. If motherhood gives you anything, it's radar. Not the fun kind that helps you find lost toys. The animal kind. The something in this room is wrong sense. That feeling hit me the moment my husband, Robert, and I walked into his parents' dining room that night. His mother, Ruth, gave me a tight smile. His father, Gerald, gave me no smile at all. And his younger sister, Jenna, sat there with the look of a cat who had eaten something it shouldn't and couldn't wait to brag about it. Our daughter, Mia, 7 years old and sweet enough to break your heart, slipped into the seat beside me. She swung her legs and hummed under her breath, oblivious to the storm gathering around her. The room was too quiet. Too ready. We made it through salad. Barely. Then Ruth cleared her throat. The kind of throat clear that means someone is about to drop a bomb disguised as family conversation. "Jenna," she said, "you wanted to share something with us?" Share. My stomach dropped. Jenna pushed her chair back and stood up slowly, dramatically, because of course she did. She pointed at me like a prosecutor in a courtroom she built in her head. "You," she announced, voice trembling with excitement, "are a cheater." I blinked. I honestly thought maybe she meant at board games, or that weird family diet challenge I keep refusing to join. But no, she meant actual cheating. Before I could process that level of delusion, Jenna turned to my daughter, to Mia, and said, "You're not really ours. Robert isn't your dad." The world dropped out from under us. Mia froze. Her little face drained of color. She looked at Robert, then at me, then back at Robert. "Daddy?" she whispered, barely audible. What does she mean?" My heart cracked so violently I swear I heard it. And then, because apparently cruelty is a group sport, Gerald added, flat and cold, "Sweetie, we're not really your grandparents." I felt Mia flinch like she'd been slapped. I reached for her immediately, pulled her out of her chair, held her against my chest. I didn't shout, didn't argue, didn't give them a show. I stood up, took her hand, and walked her toward the hallway. Behind me, I heard Jenna drop something on the table with a triumphant smack. As we turned, my eyes caught a glimpse of an envelope on the table. Thick, official-looking, the kind that comes from clinics or labs. I didn't stop or touch it, but I saw the way Robert's expression tightened when he looked at it, like he already knew exactly what it was and exactly what it meant. I kept walking, but my ears strained for Robert's voice. Inside the dining room, the shouting started. "Ruth, we did you a favor." Jenna, "It's a paternity test. Open it." Gerald, "Go on, see for yourself. She played you for a fool." Mia trembled in my arms, and then Robert's voice, calm, controlled, dangerously steady. "This," he said, "is the last time we will ever visit you." Silence. Sharp, shocked silence. Ruth sputtered, "What? What do you mean? You should be angry at her, not us." Jenna screeched, "We told you the truth." Robert didn't raise his voice, but every word hit like steel. "I can't believe you did a DNA test behind my back." A beat. "I can't believe you said this in front of a child." Another beat. "You're right about one thing." I held my breath. "You're not her grandparents anymore." Someone gasped. "And I'm not your son anymore." Chairs scraped. Someone cursed. Someone tried to talk over him. And then Robert said the line that turned the whole night inside out. "Yes, I know she isn't biologically mine." The room went dead still. "I have always known." I closed my eyes, holding Mia tighter. And my wife never cheated on me. More silence. Stunned, choking silence. The kind his family had never experienced in their lives. Then Robert's footsteps approached, slow and heavy. He appeared in the hallway, eyes on our daughter first, then on me. "Let's go," he said quietly. We left without another word. No dramatic exit. No anger. Just a clean, permanent cut. As we walked into the cold night air, Mia clinging to me, Robert's hand on my back, I felt the ground shift under us. Like the universe had finally snapped a tension wire that had been tightening for years. What happened that night didn't start at that dinner table. Not even close. To understand how we got here, you have to know what happened long before this night. If you'd told me years ago that my in-laws would someday accuse me of cheating using a secret DNA test, I wouldn't have laughed. I would have sighed and said, "Yeah, that tracks." Because the truth is, nothing with Robert's family ever happened suddenly. The red flags didn't explode. They whispered. Slowly. Persistently. Until one day, you realize you've spent years pretending things were normal when they were anything but. When I first met Robert, he was 21, sweet in a quiet way, and had that earnest, slightly overwhelmed look of someone who tried very hard to be good at everything. I fell for him embarrassingly fast. Meeting his family felt like sitting at a table where everyone else had already chosen sides. His mother, Ruth, gave interrogation-level small talk. His father, Gerald, did the thing where every sentence started with, "Well, actually." And his younger sister, Jenna, was around 10 at the time, but already fluent in superiority. The very first dinner, Ruth leaned in and asked, "So, what exactly are your intentions with our Robert?" Our Robert. Like he was a family heirloom I was sneaking out of the display cabinet. She didn't stop there. She kept weaving in subtle jabs like a mosquito invisibly dive-bombing. "Oh, Robert is such a generous boy. I'm sure he paid for your meal. Girls your age can be expensive." Mind you, I had bought the groceries for that dinner, but when people are looking for a villain, they'll script the story themselves. Jenna, even as a middle schooler, took notes like an intern training for hostility. "Why do you let him buy you things?" she'd ask. "He bought me a $2 plastic keychain," I said once. "That adds up," she said, dead serious. Meanwhile, the actual financial foundation of the family was Robert. He'd put himself through community college with no help from Ruth and Gerald, then went straight into working full-time. And from the moment he got his first paycheck, his parents treated his income like it was part of their monthly budget. He called it helping. I called it mandatory tithing to the church of emotional guilt. Still, we got married. We were happy. We built our own routines, our own little world, and the bi-weekly dinners with his parents became something I tolerated the way you tolerate dentist cleanings. Necessary, mildly painful, survivable. Then we started trying for a baby. Trying turned into tracking. Tracking turned into timing. Timing turned into 2 years of nothing. And then came the doctor's office. The too quiet room. The pause before the results. The soft voice delivering a hard truth. Robert would never have biological children. Not low chance. Not maybe someday. 0. My husband held my hand, squeezed once, and whispered, "Okay." And he meant it. But that okay lived in the back of my ribs for months. We talked. For hours. Days. Weeks. It came down to 3 choices. Stay child-free. Adopt. Use a sperm donor. In the end, we chose the donor. Not because it was easy, nothing about it was, but because it gave us the chance to build the family we wanted without waiting years in an adoption system held together with paperwork and prayers. So we made the decision. Quietly. Privately. Then we made another. We wouldn't tell Robert's family, not because we were ashamed, but because we knew they would use it like ammunition, weaponize it, whisper about it, turn it into a hierarchy of real versus not real. And the idea of Ruth or Gerald looking at our child and seeing something less than was unbearable. Then our daughter Mia was born. And oh, she was perfect. She looked like me. A lot like me. Which made sense, of course. But even then, Ruth couldn't help herself. She doesn't have any of Robert's features, she'd say, squinting. Funny that. Gerald once asked, half joking. Sure she's yours, Robbie. It took every molecule of self-control in Robert's body to stay calm, but the worst was Jenna, because she was old enough to know better and still chose cruelty. You guys spoil her, she'd say. Meanwhile, we bought her a bubble wand for $3. But in Jenna's mind, any dollar spent on Mia was a dollar stolen from her Royal College fund. And speaking of that, when Jenna graduated high school, she announced she was attending an expensive private university, not community college, not something modest, a school with a tuition bill that looked like a surgical procedure. Guess who she expected to pay? Not her parents. Nope. Robert. And he did. For 2 years, 2 full years, he paid her tuition. Not her housing, not her meals. She had to work part-time. But the tuition itself was massive. A generous, back-breaking gift. And what did Jenna say every time she visited? You're spending too much on your wife. You take too many vacations with Mia. If you didn't spoil your own family so much, maybe you could help your real family. Real family. Funny word now. Looking back, all the signs were there. All the resentment, all the entitlement, all the jealousy, and all the pressure to make sure their golden daughter got everything she wanted, even at the expense of ours. But nothing prepared me for the night when all those years of quiet poison finally erupted. And my 7-year-old learned the truth in the most brutal way possible. And that truth? That wasn't the end. That was just the beginning. If silence had a temperature, the drive home that night could have flash-frozen a lake. Mia sat in the back seat, small and rigid, staring out the window like she was afraid the darkness might stare back. Robert gripped the steering wheel with both hands, knuckles white. I kept glancing at her through the mirror, waiting for a question, a tear, a breath. Anything. Nothing. Just a little girl holding her whole world together with 2 trembling hands. When we got home, she walked inside like she was sleepwalking. She didn't run to her toys, didn't take off her shoes, didn't ask for a snack. She just stood in the hallway, waiting for someone to tell her what reality was now. Robert and I exchanged a look, the kind that says, okay, this is where we stop being shocked and start being parents. We sat with her on the couch. I took her hand. Robert took the other. Mia, I said softly, remember how we've told you that we wanted you for a very long time? She nodded. Well, Robert said gently, when Mommy and I were trying to have a baby, the doctors told us my body couldn't make babies the regular way, so they helped us. Mia blinked, watching him like she was trying to understand a foreign language spoken underwater. You grew in Mommy's tummy, he continued. You were always wanted. You were always loved. And you are my daughter. Now and always. And Mommy never cheated, I added, because that poison needed to be neutralized immediately. Daddy has always known how you were made. He never had a second of doubt. She didn't cry. She didn't ask anything. She just nodded once, quietly slipped off the couch, and walked toward her room. The door clicked shut behind her. Robert rubbed his face. I don't know if that was acceptance or emotional shutdown. Both, I said. Welcome to childhood trauma speedruns. We gave her space. She needed it. We also needed a moment to breathe because the chaos wasn't over. It was just getting started. Robert walked into the office and sat down at his computer, his face set in a way that left no room for negotiation. Calm, steady, done. He opened the banking app. First click, cancel recurring transfer to Ruth and Gerald. Second click, cancel Jenna's tuition payment. Third click, shut down the extra debit card Jenna had been using. "Tara," he called from the office. "I'm cutting off everything. All of it." I walked to the doorway. "Good." He let out a short, shaky laugh. "Feels weirdly healthy." "Well," I said, "I'd bake you a congratulatory cake, but after tonight, I'm not sure either of us can emotionally handle cake." He leaned back in the chair, exhaling. "Honestly, this feels like the first decision I've made about them that actually makes sense." The next morning was quiet. Too quiet. Mia came out of her room holding a stuffed animal and asked if she could watch cartoons. No meltdown, no follow-up questions, just gentleness, fragility. I kept her close all day. Around noon, Robert's phone started ringing. Ruth and Gerald. He stared at the screen like it was something radioactive. "Tara," he said flatly. "They know about the tuition." He answered. The screaming started instantly. "How could you do this? Your sister needs this. You're ruining her future. We can't afford this without you. It's 2 days before the deadline." Robert held the phone an inch from his ear, expression blank. "I'm not paying anymore," he said calmly. "Robert, be reasonable," Gerald barked. "She can't study without your support." "She's 20, he replied. "She can take a loan, get a job, be an adult." Ruth practically shrieked. "You can't abandon family!" "You abandoned mine last night," he said. There was silence. Sharp. Ugly. Sizzling. Then the guilt-tripping began. "You're choosing her over us. You're brainwashed. You owe us. Your sister is counting on you." Robert hung up. Just hung up. No dramatic speech, no yelling, just a click. I walked over and kissed his cheek. "I'm proud of you." He looked startled. "I've never done that before," he admitted. "Hung up on them. Feels good though, right?" He let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it since childhood. "Yeah. Actually, yeah." Mia peeked around the corner. "Daddy? Are Grandma and Grandpa mad?" Robert crouched down to her level. "They're upset because they did something wrong," he said. "Not because of you." She nodded and went to her room without a word. Robert exhaled, leaning a shoulder against the wall like all the weight he'd been carrying finally slid into one place. We didn't even get 20 minutes before someone hammered at the door. Not frantic, not polite, just the kind of knock that says, "We're coming in one way or another." Robert's head lifted. "I'll get it," I said, already halfway there. I opened the door just a crack. Ruth and Gerald, faces tight, breathing hard. That self-righteous anger older people get when they feel they've been disrespected. "Let us in," Ruth said. Not a question. I stepped aside so the neighbors wouldn't have a front row seat. They walked in like the house belonged to them. Robert came into the hallway. His expression didn't change, but his whole posture did. "What are you doing here?" he asked. Gerald answered with, "You hung up on us." Robert didn't deny it. "Yes." Ruth's eyebrows shot up. "That's how you speak to your parents now?" "That's how I speak to anyone who crosses a line," he said. Ruth folded her arms. "We want an explanation. Immediately." Robert nodded once. "Fine. I canceled the tuition payments. I'm not paying anymore." Gerald blinked. "You what?" "You heard me." "You can't do that," Ruth snapped. She needs that money. She's 20, Robert said. Plenty of adults figure it out. That's easy for you to say, Gerald said. You already had help when you were young. From who? Robert asked. Because it wasn't either of you. Ruth inhaled sharply. Don't be dramatic. We supported you in our own ways. You criticized Tara every chance you got, Robert said. You treated her like she was stealing from me when she was paying half our bills. You treated Mia like a guest. And now this. Ruth's lips thinned. Jenna made a mistake. I stepped closer. She told my daughter she wasn't family. She didn't mean it, Ruth insisted. She spoke without thinking. And you backed her, Robert said. Gerald shook his head. You're overreacting. You're letting emotions cloud your judgment. Emotions? Robert echoed. My daughter cried herself to sleep because of what you said. Ruth stiffened. We didn't say anything cruel. We simply told the truth. You told a 7-year-old that she wasn't really part of her family, I said. You think that's not cruel? Gerald took a step forward. Well, maybe if you hadn't lied about... Stop. Robert's voice turned low. Say what you want to say. Gerald swallowed, then said it plainly. You should have told us. Ruth added, We had a right to know that she isn't our granddaughter. Biologically. My breath stuck in my throat. That was the sentence that cracked the house open. Because behind us, at the edge of the hallway, a small voice whispered, Daddy? Mia stood there, bare feet, wet hair, face pale. Her eyes flicked between all of us. They said, I'm not their granddaughter. Her voice broke on the last word. I didn't even think. I went to her, lifting her before her knees gave out. She clung to my shirt and started to cry, quiet, shuddering sobs that made her whole body shake. Ruth took a step toward her. Sweetheart, you misunderstood. We didn't mean... Don't, Robert said. His tone was level, not raised, but final. He walked toward us, putting a protective hand on Mia's back while she shook against me. Then he turned to his parents. You need to leave. Ruth blinked. Robert, listen. I'm done listening. Gerald's voice tightened. We came here to fix this. No, Robert said. You came here to justify yourselves. Ruth frowned. This is not how a son speaks to his parents. Robert didn't move. This is how a father protects his child. The sentence hung in the air like a closing door. Ruth's eyes flashed with insult. You would throw away your own family over a misunderstanding? You are the ones who threw us away, Robert said. The moment you made Mia believe she didn't belong. Gerald shook his head, stunned that he was losing control of the narrative. If we walk out that door, you won't be coming back, Robert finished. He opened the front door, holding it with steady hands. Please go. Ruth stared at him for a long few seconds, disbelief written across her face. But Robert didn't look away. Eventually, she stepped past him. Gerald followed. They walked to the car without another word. Robert shut the door, locked it, checked it twice. When he turned around, the anger in him was gone, replaced with something quieter and far heavier. He took Mia gently from my arms and held her against him, her small fists still gripping his shirt. It's okay, he whispered. You're okay. She cried until her breath slowed, until the tension melted out of her little body, until the only sound in the house was her soft sniffing. Robert didn't let go. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Some choices explained themselves. Later, after she finally fell asleep, we stood in the doorway watching her breathe. Robert took my hand. This isn't the end of it, he murmured. You know that. I nodded. It wasn't. The week that followed was quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, just normal in a way we hadn't felt in years. Mia didn't ask about Ruth or Gerald again. She didn't bring up what she overheard. She didn't cry at bedtime. She just slowly returned to herself. One night while we made dinner, she asked very seriously, "Do we still have to go to Grandma Ruth's Sunday lunches?" Robert froze with the spatula midair. I held my breath. Then she added, "Because I don't want to pretend to like her meatloaf anymore. It tastes like old socks." I choked on my drink. Robert actually laughed. A small, tired laugh, but real. "No," he told her. "No more Sunday lunches." "Good," she said, already moving on. "Can we have tacos instead?" Just like that, a weight shifted. In the evenings, she colored at the dining table while Robert caught up on work, and I finished my own tasks. Sometimes she'd wander over, lean against him, and ask what he was typing with that tiny, suspicious frown kids get. Sometimes she'd crawl into my lap and show me drawings of our little family, just the three of us, standing under a crooked sun. She didn't draw Ruth and Gerald in any of them, and I didn't ask why. A quiet week passed. Not peaceful, just steady, like we were all learning to breathe again. Then, on Saturday morning, just as Robert and I were getting Mia's shoes on for a library trip, there was a knock at the door, not loud, not aggressive, just a soft, hesitant knock. Robert and I looked at each other. We both knew exactly who it was before we even opened the door. Jenna. Standing alone on the porch, holding a small box wrapped in bakery twine. Her eyes were red, her shoulders round, and for the first time in her life, she looked unsure of her place in the world. "Tara," she said, voice thin. "Can I talk to you both?" Robert stepped beside me. His jaw tightened automatically. He was polite, but only in the way you're polite to a stranger holding a suspicious package. Jenna swallowed hard. "I came to apologize." She held out the cake like an offering to the gods. Her hands were shaking. "I really didn't know," she said. "If I had known the truth, I would never have said those things. And not in front of Mia. That was horrible. I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked on sorry, and for a moment I saw the frightened teenager underneath all the entitlement. Robert nodded once. Nothing warm, nothing soft. Just acknowledgement. "We accept your apology," he said. Jenna looked relieved, then panicked, then relieved again. She glanced behind us. "Is Mia here? I want to say it to her too." "No," I said. "And she doesn't need any more confusion right now." Jenna nodded quickly. "Right. Of course, that makes sense." A long silence stretched out. The kind people fill with fake small talk. But Jenna didn't reach for small talk. She reached for the real reason she came. "I also wanted to ask," she began, eyes darting everywhere except at us, "if you could still pay my tuition." There it was. Robert didn't react. Not even a blink. Jenna kept going, words spilling out like she was trying to outrun her own desperation. "I can't afford it. Not even close. And if I don't pay, they'll drop me from the semester. I don't know what to do." She took a shaky breath. "Could you maybe just loan it to me? I swear I'll pay it back when I graduate, or when I get a job, or—" "No," Robert said. The word landed like a hammer. Jenna blinked, stunned. "No?" "No," he repeated. "I'm not paying anymore." She swallowed hard. "Okay, I get it. After everything that happened, it's complicated. But maybe just this semester? Just to get me through the transition." "No!" Her face twisted. "Please," she whispered. "I can't drop out. You don't understand. No one else can help me." I understand perfectly, Robert said. You're an adult. Adults figure things out. She looked like she'd been slapped. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she said quietly. I didn't know. That's the problem, Robert cut in. You didn't know. You didn't ask. You didn't care how it would affect a 7-year-old hearing those words. Jenna's mouth trembled. Tears burned at the edges of her eyes. I said I was sorry, she whispered. And we accepted your apology, I said. But an apology isn't a coupon. She winced. I can't believe you'd let me fail, she said softly. After everything. After everything, Robert repeated. After everything I paid? After the years of helping? After everything my daughter went through? Yes. After everything. Another tear slipped down her cheek. Is there anything I can do? She whispered. No, Robert said. Her shoulders collapsed inward. She looked, for the first time in her life, small. Really small. She turned to leave. Hand on the doorknob, she paused and said almost inaudibly, I never thought you'd choose her over us. Robert stared at her like she'd spoken Martian. She's my daughter, he said. There was never a choice. Jenna nodded once, sharp, defeated, and walked into the cold. Robert closed the door, locked it, then leaned against it, letting out a long, exhausted breath. I walked over and pressed my forehead against his. We did the right thing, I said. He nodded, eyes closed. I know. I just didn't expect it to feel like this. Like what? Like I finally grew up. 6 months later, life is simple in a way it hasn't been in years. We've stayed no contact. No more shouting matches, no guilt trips, no sudden demands for money. Just calm. Robert's paycheck stays with us now. Every dollar. And Mia? She's happier than I've ever seen her. Light. Confident. Completely unbothered by the people who once made her feel small. Meanwhile, word gets around. Ruth and Gerald had to take out emergency loans after Jenna missed the chance to apply for student loans. Then another loan when that wasn't enough. They even refinanced their house to cover her tuition. Now they're buried in debt, and Jenna is exhausted working extra hours just to keep up. The same people who treated us like we owed them the world, they're the ones sinking. And us? We're finally free. So what do you think? Did Robert go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more. My sister Emily asked our grandfather, not our father, to walk her down the aisle. Years of cold family values led to that choice. Our parents raged, relatives whispered, church friends asked questions. I didn't plead. I did this. By morning, the threats stopped, and the guest list changed. I'm 35. I have a brother, Liam, he's 23, and a sister, Emily, she's 29. We grew up in the United States, in the Midwest, in the Chicago suburbs, where Sundays empty the streets for church services, and the neighbors' lawns are clipped nearly to a line. Our parents are extremely religious and conservative. They talked more about family values than they ever practiced them. They wanted a son badly and were wildly disappointed when first I arrived, and then another girl, my sister Emily. I was their firstborn. Grandma Helen told me that, when they found out Mom was expecting a girl, they seriously considered not keeping me, but in the end, citing their religious beliefs, they kept the pregnancy. When I was just 2, Mom sent me to my grandparents because my presence at home supposedly worsened her depression. That's how my childhood with Helen and Walter began. In a small house with a maple by the steps, where summer smelled like wet soil and mint from Grandma's garden. I formed a special bond with Grandpa. He taught me to ride a bike with astonishing patience. First he held the seat and jogged beside me around the block. Then he let go, and I rode on my own. I can still feel it. The wind in my face, the click of spokes, the shouts of neighborhood kids on the next street. Those lessons weren't just about balance. They were about having an adult beside me who didn't raise his voice, didn't shame me, just believed I could do it. Grandma, for her part, taught me gardening. How to loosen the soil, how to tell a weed from a seedling, how to wait for the first peony to open. I watched flowers unfurl and loved my small corner of nature, the patch she gave me at the back of the bed. Those skills still help me stay calm, ground me, literally. My parents didn't visit me once until I turned 7, until neighbors and people from our church started asking out loud why their eldest daughter wasn't living with them. Then, so it wouldn't look strange, Mom and Dad came and took me from Helen and Walter, despite my protests. I cried and begged to be left where there was stability, warm arms, predictability. But they buckled me into the car and drove me home, to the very house where I felt like a guest. 3 more years went by, and it seemed like our parents found their joy again. They were expecting a second child. When it turned out to be another girl, you could see the disappointment, though it wasn't as loud as it had been with me. Thankfully, Emily didn't have to live what I did. She wasn't sent to the grandparents. She grew up with our parents. But the difference in how we were treated was obvious. From me, it was expected that I'd help Mom with practically everything in the house. Dishes, cleaning, cooking, wrangling the little kids in Sunday school, an endless list that told me, day after day, that usefulness mattered more than my feelings. When it came to Emily, the rules were softer. She was pitied more, understood more. Her mistakes were treated as a normal part of growing up, not a personal failure to be shamed for. School was the same story. They pressed me to excel at everything. Only A, no A. You need more clubs and activities. They signed me up for extra classes, and any deviation from the perfect trajectory was taken as a sign of ingratitude. When Emily started school, the atmosphere for her was much calmer. Our parents still cared about her grades, but they didn't shove her into rigid rails. They let her choose what she liked and let her go to school events without endless lectures. And the way they celebrated our achievements, especially that, was night and day. If I won an academic contest or wrote a flawless test, it rarely came with more than a short, good job. Any progress Emily made became a mini party. Cake, a family photo later posted on Facebook, calls to relatives. I couldn't understand for a long time how the same parents could raise 2 daughters so differently. It was hard to grow up under constant criticism while watching my sister live, relatively, an easier childhood. Even so, I tried not to be angry at Emily. She didn't choose my childhood, or hers. I helped with homework, went to her performances, tried to be a steady example so that, at the very least, she'd have an older sister she could lean on. We kept a warm bond, even with the ache gathering inside me. 6 years after Emily was born, everything changed. Liam arrived, the long-awaited son. Our parents threw a full-on feast. Gifts, people from our church community, the pastor's congratulations, long speeches about the heir. From day one, you could see he got special treatment. Expensive clothes, the trendiest toys, the best stroller, a pricey crib, and a stunning nursery. Nothing like the rooms Emily and I had. But it wasn't just the things. They gave him far more attention. Thousands of photos, videos of every little goo, sentimental posts on social media. They didn't miss a single pediatrician's appointment, argued over the vaccine schedule, hunted for the best specialists. With me or my sister, they'd never been that involved. The inequality didn't fade as Liam grew. He was excused from chores we did by default. Let the girls take out the trash. Let the girls load the dishwasher. Let the girls mow the lawn. Liam has to get to his tutor. His birthdays became grand productions with pricey gifts, balloons, and rented venues. Emily and I felt second class beside all that. To be honest, I was used to it by then. For Emily, it was her first head-on collision with what I'd lived through, and it hurt. We ran to Grandma and Grandpa's even more. like to a shelter. Countless days in their garden, evenings by the fireplace, long talks about fears, dreams, and how heavy home felt. Grandma always told us, "You're not alone. You have us." When I hit my teens, my parents slapped a rebel label on me, just because my views didn't match their church dogma and political slogans. If I tried to explain my position, Mom would start crying and say I was driving her up the wall. If I showed sadness or anger near her, she'd snap, scream, then disappear from contact for hours, as if I didn't exist in the house. When Emily got older and began to show her own mind, she developed anxiety. For years, Mom refused to take her to a specialist. "You don't need that. Pull yourself together." And when Emily had panic attacks, Mom said she was causing inconvenience and ruining the atmosphere in the house. One night, it became unbearable. Our parents didn't bother to hide it anymore. We were disappointments. We shouldn't have been born. God had sent them a test. Those words fell like stones, and we couldn't take it any longer. Feeling lost and hurt, Emily and I packed bags and drove to Helen and Walter's, to the house that smelled like mint and fresh cookies in the evenings. Our parents found out fast where we were, and by morning they were on Grandma's porch. They demanded we come back immediately. For the first time in a long while, Grandma spoke to them hard, asked how they'd explain what was happening at home, why they treated their daughters that way. Dad, eyes down, muttered that he provided food and a roof, and what more did we want? And then Grandpa, calm, even-tempered Walter, raised his voice for the first time. He told my father he should be ashamed of how he treated his children, and he added, if our father did anything again that harmed us, he would call Child Protective Services, CPS. That genuinely scared them. Liam was still small, and the prospect of dealing with state services, especially in Cook County where, as the neighbors said, those calls are taken seriously, was the last thing they wanted. Grandpa didn't back down. He said straight out that we deserved better parents than the ones they had been so far, and I can still see him turn to my mother and say, "You are my daughter. But I never treated you the way you treat your children." My mother's face flushed in red patches. She was ashamed. That fight in Helen and Walter's kitchen was a turning point. For the first time, someone stood up for us openly and hard. Not with "be patient," but with action. With the threat to call the place you call when a child truly needs protection. After that night, the situation at home shifted a little. Our parents, especially my father, were clearly rattled by Grandpa Walter's hard words and his threat to call Child Protective Services, and they started behaving a little more calmly. Liam still got special attention, but the shouting and punishments aimed at Emily and me came less often. When I turned 18, I wanted college badly. I dreamed of getting out of the Chicago suburbs and trying campus life, even at an ordinary state school. My parents were adamantly against it. We fought hard. My mother kept saying that, as a girl, I should focus on marriage and children. She repeated that men don't like women who are too educated, and that campuses are a hotbed of depravity and liberalism. My father backed her up, mocking the idea of a woman's mind, earning a degree and insisting school would be useless to me. It hurt deeply to hear my own parents talk me out of independence for no other reason than that I was a girl. Despite their protests, I applied to several schools at once and got in. I was accepted into an honors program and received a scholarship, so my parents didn't have to pay for tuition or housing. They were furious that I disobeyed them. I didn't care. For the first time, I felt like I was steering my own life. I picked up part-time work on campus, first the library desk, then a cafe off the quad, and started putting money aside bit by bit. That season was a turning point. I learned to juggle adult responsibilities, balancing classes, work, and the rare scraps of a personal life. It wasn't easy, but every past exam and every month that closed in the black made me stronger, more independent. All that time, my parents called once in a while to see how I was. The calls were strange. A few formal questions, zero real interest. By graduation, I expected neither support nor praise. In the end, I finished my degree and took a full-time job in my field. Thanks to the shifts I'd worked during school and a little discipline, I saved enough to rent an apartment with roommates on the north side. Our contact with our parents grew rarer, then almost vanished, and not only because of me. It seemed they were perfectly content with the distance. Birthdays and holidays turned into the occasional perfunctory happy birthday text, sometimes a card with no note. When life hit harder than usual, trouble at work, a breakup, my first impulse was still to call family. I stopped myself. Going back to those emotional roller coasters we'd lived through with our parents felt unbearable. Little by little, it became a deliberate choice to cut them out of my life entirely. The only person in the parental circle I stayed close to was my sister, Emily. When it was her turn to apply to college, our parents threatened to throw her out if she dared get into all that schooling. I told her to move in with me. I needed to be sure she could keep chasing her own dream and build a future without parental bans and dictates. Emily moved, enrolled in a local college, a community college with a transfer path to a state school, and I worked hard to carry us both. Rent, utilities, Trader Joe's runs, sometimes bus tickets back to campus. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to back her education and see her through. During that time, our bond grew even stronger. We shared a kitchen and the daily load, and I took comfort in knowing that, despite the mess with our parents, I could create a safe, steady space for my sister to grow. When Liam got older, he didn't face what Emily and I had faced. Of course he didn't. Our parents proudly sent him to college. They paid application fees, test prep courses, campus tours in Michigan and Wisconsin. More than that, they had saved up enough for him to study without financial strain. Dorm deposits, a 4-school laptop, private tutors. Liam clearly got chances and privileges we never had. I felt a complicated mix, happiness for my brother and the ache of contrast. Even so, Emily and I held the line together, determined to get past the weight our childhood put on us. Through all the rises and dips, Grandma Helen and Grandpa Walter stayed our constant warmth. They called, sent cards, came to the city when they could. A few years ago, Grandma passed. Emily and I rushed home to our old suburb in Cook County to be with Grandpa. It was the first time in a long while we saw our parents. They greeted us with a nod, like we were strangers. I held back tears, too many memories and too little tenderness in their eyes. I didn't want my mother scolding me for making a scene, so I just hugged Emily and took Grandpa's hand a little tighter. After the funeral, we started visiting Walter more often. We shuffled schedules, caught the Metra, got to his place, cooked lunch together, or simply sat on the porch and remembered how he taught me to keep the handlebars steady, how Grandma taught me to tell peonies by the bud. On weekends, we gave whole days to his house, swapped bulbs, sorted tools in the garage, set the timers on the sprinklers, walked the nearby park. Over one of those lunches, Grandpa suddenly said he was proud of how I look after my little sister. I froze and felt warmth rise to my eyes. It had been years since anyone in the family had honestly recognized my effort. Walter smiled, ruffled my hair lightly, and added that Emily was lucky to have me, and that he believed in my change the world in small steps potential. His eyes shone with pride. That look is fixed in my memory forever. Liam, our parents' favorite, kept his distance from us, maybe afraid they'd drop him the way they had once dropped us. In recent years, Emily and I bumped into him only at the occasional family thing, or heard from cousins how much our parents were doing for him while ignoring us. They bought him a couple of used cars to make the campus commute easier, paid the security deposit on a house so he could move out, and last year even gifted him a trip to New York with his girlfriend. A break, since he works so hard. We learned about it in the relatives group chat. The congratulations emojis flew in one direction only. Recently, Emily, who'd been with her boyfriend Robert since college, got engaged. The news filled me with joy. They're a wonderful match. There's a quiet certainty in the way they look at each other that you can't fake. The proposal was truly magical. A river walk, yellow light on the bridge, Robert down on one knee. Emily glowed, showing her ring to anyone who wanted to share the moment. She posted the photos, and off it went. Relatives called, wrote, left warm comments. Of course, the news reached our parents. Our phones blew up with their calls and messages, surprising after years of silence. Emily and I traded a look. Why now? Why suddenly become part of our happiness after keeping their distance for so long? When Emily finally answered Mom all but gushed. How happy she was. How she'd long waited for this day. Emily thanked her, polite, brief. And then the hard part began. Mom started firing questions. Who Robert was, where he worked, whether they could meet in person. Knowing their habit of arriving with a holy mission, Emily tried to deflect and cited the rush of planning. But my father, likely sitting right beside her, cut in and added firmly that they had earned the right to meet the man their daughter was going to marry. The push worked. Emily, after a pause, agreed, but said she wouldn't come alone. I'm bringing my sister. To our surprise, our parents agreed without argument. On the appointed day, the three of us, Emily, Robert, and I, went to our parents' house. The tension was there from the threshold. They met us with tight smiles, as if rehearsing a scene of an ideal family. Mom greeted Robert with a showy warmth, offered homemade lemonade. We sat at the table, and I could see how each of us sat a little straighter than usual. Sensing the stiffness, Robert tried to soften the room. He talked about himself, his work, how he and Emily loved weekend trips to the Botanic Garden. The conversation eased over into the wedding, dates, venue, guest list. And that was when the interesting part began. Our parents started gently hinting that it would be wonderful if the father of the bride, our dad, were the one to walk Emily down the aisle, and that Mom should have an important role, somewhere in the middle of the attention. Emily and I exchanged a glance. Dad moved past the hints. It was important to show family unity in front of the relatives, so there wouldn't be awkward questions. Mom nodded along, adding that she didn't want Robert's family thinking Emily had no parents, and therefore they needed to be present in significant roles. Hearing that, my sister and I looked at each other again, and I felt Emily's shoulders go tight. It was suddenly clear why we'd been invited. Our parents were afraid Emily wouldn't invite them to the wedding and didn't want relatives asking awkward questions. It could bruise their standing in the family and at our church. I shook my head, seeing the real motive. Emily thanked them politely for the offer, then said, calm and even, that she had already decided who would walk her down the aisle. My father, curious and gently performative, asked whom she had chosen for such an important role. Emily smiled, steady. Grandpa Walter will walk me down the aisle. For a second they froze, their faces not quick enough to hide the shock. Expectation flipped to anger. Hard to accept that their daughter had chosen her grandfather over them. The familiar pressure began. Mom. Sweetheart, by tradition, the father walks the daughter down the aisle. You can't break tradition. Emily. You know, Mom, I don't care about tradition when there's nothing behind it. I want Grandpa to be part of this moment. He was there when you both forgot you had daughters. You can come to the wedding, but as guests, like the rest of the relatives. Dad pressed his mouth into a line. You can't just push us aside. We're your parents. I laughed out loud. They hadn't expected that. Looking my father in the eye, I said, You and Mom forgot you were parents a long time ago. For years you treated us like excess. You have no right to demand that Emily listen to you. The words landed, hard. He bristled, my mother flushed, but Emily stood firm. You don't get to declare parental rights after ignoring us for years. I added, Actions have consequences. You don't get to rewrite the past. Emily drew the line clearly. Their role at the wedding would be limited, like any other guest. Attend if they wished, but no control. The meeting ended on a bitter note, but my sister didn't budge. Leaving the house, I felt two things at once: admiration for her courage and the dull disappointment that our parents still didn't see where their choices had led. From that day, the calls and messages poured in, from our parents and a few relatives, accusing us of selfishness and cruelty because a father had been denied the right to walk his daughter down the aisle. We stayed quiet. A few hours after the engagement news swept through the family chats, something else came into focus. To everyone asking about Grandpa, Emily had already told him she was engaged. He was the first to congratulate her. But we hadn't said she wanted him to walk her down the aisle. We decided to do that in person and watch his face. This weekend we were headed to his suburb, where he lives alone now. Meanwhile, our parents kept at it, sending angry messages. My father even wrote Robert a long Facebook screed, demanded he bring his fiancée to reason because a man should take things in hand, insisted Emily had no right to ask her grandfather because tradition says father, and finished with a threat. If Robert allowed this, he and Mom wouldn't attend the wedding. Robert answered simply and calm, "My fiancée will do what she wants." I fully support her. Whether you attend is your choice. I could almost see my father's face as he read it. He'd counted on compliance. The thought made me smile. That weekend, Emily and I drove to Grandpa Walter's. The road felt short. We were wired and couldn't wait to say the words. We sat on his porch with lemonade, talked about nothing and everything, and then Emily took a breath and said, "Grandpa, I want to ask you something important. Please walk me down the aisle. You've been there all these years. I can't imagine anyone else doing it." Walter's eyes filled. He stood, hugged Emily so tightly it was as if he was afraid to let go, and said it would be a great honor. My throat stung, and the three of us stood there, holding on to each other, like those old evenings when Grandma Helen called us in from the yard for dinner. We told him about the conversation with our parents and about my father's message to Robert. Walter only smiled a little and said he'd handle our mother just fine if she decided to make a scene, and that nothing would stop him from walking Emily down the aisle. Emily's shoulders dropped. The tension slid off. We stayed until evening, tidied the garage, checked the smoke detectors, made a grocery list. Before we left, I hugged him again. This man had been the anchor we'd always lacked. Weeks went by. Wedding prep swept everyone up. A venue on the north side, calls with the officiant, the seating chart, the dress, fitting Walter's suit. I caught myself counting the days until I'd see Emily shining, walking toward Robert on Grandpa's arm. 3 months later, the day finally came, and it exceeded every hope. The space looked exactly as we'd wanted. Light, greenery, warm wood. Guests filled the hall. The air carried joy and a hum of expectation. One absence was especially noticeable: our parents. After we limited their role in the ceremony, they chose not to come. We accepted their choice. The ceremony itself was magical. Emily, in her dress, radiant, stood beside Grandpa. Love and pride lived in his eyes as they came down the aisle. Trusting Walter with that role was exactly right, and Emily's smile said everything. The room was full of warmth, laughter, kind toasts. Emily and Robert exchanged vows, promising each other loyalty and care. The celebration ran late. Dancing, jokes, embraces, photos against the lights. After the wedding, life settled into its new shape. Emily and I made a deliberate choice to block our parents on every channel, so they couldn't pour their drama and bitterness into our days. We still visit Walter regularly, trying to give him as much time as we can. The path has been hard, but we want only the people who truly care for us nearby. If you've stayed to the end, thank you. Tell us what you think in the comments. Subscribe so you don't miss new videos, and take a look at the earlier ones. They're right here. I wish you warm ties with those who truly love you, your parents, your grandfathers and grandmothers, and everyone who chooses you every day. I flew them all to Hawaii. They booked me in a motel an hour away. Just because you paid doesn't mean we want you around, my brother joked. I didn't argue, just smiled and left something in the hotel safe. When they found it, they started screaming. It was supposed to be the trip that changed everything. For the first time in years, I'd planned a real family vacation. Not a rushed long weekend at my apartment. Not a chaotic Thanksgiving where everyone yelled about politics. A real slow, golden sunset memory-making kind of trip. I spent 11 months planning it. No exaggeration. I created folders. I made spreadsheets. I researched group rates and credit card points. I compared resorts, ranked beaches by accessibility and kid-friendliness, and cross-checked weather trends for the shoulder season. I even paid a travel agent a small consultation fee to make sure I wasn't getting scammed because I wanted this to be perfect, and not just for me, for them, for my mom, Jill, who hadn't had a real vacation in over a decade, for Rick, my stepdad, who worked overtime shifts at the auto shop and talked about Hawaii like it was some mythical place he'd never see, for Brandon, my younger brother, and his wife Haley, who always seemed stressed and exhausted but still showed up for Christmas even when money was tight, and for Erin, my cousin, and her little boy Liam. He'd never been on a plane before. I wanted him to see the ocean. I'd been the boring one my whole life. Responsible Natalie. Quiet Natalie. The one who showed up with jumper cables and remembered everyone's birthdays. But maybe, just maybe, this trip would be the moment they'd look at me and see something more. Someone they were proud of. I wasn't rich. Far from it. I work in IT support and live in a modest apartment. I budgeted for this trip the way some people plan for a wedding. Canceled other plans, said no to upgrades at the dentist, skipped birthdays, declined dates. I'd been working toward this single week in Hawaii like it was the finish line to a race no one else knew I was running. So when we landed and walked out into the humid plumeria-scented air, my heart was full. I even took a deep breath and thought, this is it. We got our lees. We took the awkward group photo. I tipped the shuttle driver in advance to help with the bags. Everyone was smiling. Even Brandon seemed relaxed for once, making Liam laugh with bad pirate impressions. When we pulled up to the resort, it looked exactly like the pictures. Maybe better. White columns, green palms swaying, that kind of soft golden light that makes everything look like a travel ad. I stepped up to the check-in desk, excited to surprise everyone with how well I'd planned it. The rooms were ocean-facing. I'd arranged welcome baskets with local snacks and reef-safe sunscreen. I had even pre-booked a beach dinner for the third night. The receptionist smiled politely. Name? Natalie Fielding. I booked the Fielding family group. She typed, scanned the screen, frowned. I see the group booking here, but your name isn't on the room list. You're in a separate reservation. Royal Sands Motel. My smile faltered. No, that's not right. I booked everything under my name. She tilted the screen slightly, showing me the breakdown. The names were all there. Jill, Rick, Brandon, Haley, Erin, Liam, but not mine. That's when Brandon walked over, holding 2 room keys like he owned the place. Oh yeah, he said, casual. We moved your spot to a quieter place up the road. Figured you'd want your space, I laughed, unsure if it was a joke. Wait, what? Haley joined him, sunglasses already on. It's better that way, isn't it? The motel's super close. Just an hour, I blinked. Why would I stay in a motel? Brandon shrugged. Look, just because you paid doesn't mean we want you around the whole time. He said it like it was funny, like we were still at baggage claim and he was teasing me about my carry-on. Haley chuckled. Come on, don't be weird about it. Weird, right? Of course. Jill finally stepped in, arms crossed like she was bracing for drama. Honey, it's no big deal. There just wasn't room for everyone, and Aaron really wanted to stay with us. Plus, you like quiet, don't you? You've always been independent. The polite word for unwanted. Rick mumbled something like, "You'll be more comfortable there anyway," without looking at me. And I stood there in that cool, expensive lobby, holding my suitcase, realizing they'd all made the decision together behind my back. After I paid for everything, I could have fought it. I could have said, "Actually, no. I booked this. I deserve to be here." But the words caught in my throat. My heart pounded in my ears. My face felt hot. Instead, I nodded. "Sure," I said. "Sounds peaceful." I took the new address from the front desk and rolled my suitcase out through the side door, past the valet and the bellhop and the manicured hibiscus bushes. The Uber driver gave me a look when I told him where to go. "That place? You sure?" I smiled like it didn't matter. "Yeah, I'm sure." The motel was, well, it had a roof. I'll give it that. The room smelled like air freshener and unresolved crime. The beach access was technically accurate if you didn't mind crossing 2 roads and a parking lot to get to the strip of sand. The bedspread had a strange, sticky texture. I didn't care to investigate. The only view was of a rusty vending machine and a faded sign with half the bulbs out. "Royal Sands. Stay a while." I sat on the edge of the bed, suitcase still closed, and stared at the wall for a long time. I kept waiting for someone to call to say they'd made a mistake, to laugh and say, "Gotcha. You're actually staying with us. Come back." Nothing. I thought about the tiny gifts I'd packed for everyone. Hawaiian-themed puzzles for Liam, a set of local teas for Mom, a water-safe phone case Brandon had mentioned wanting. They were still zipped in my carry-on, neatly wrapped. I'd imagined handing them out the first night. Everyone pleasantly surprised, laughing over drinks by the pool. Instead, I was alone listening to a couple argue in the next room about whether the baby looked more like her ex. I showered in flip-flops. I couldn't bring myself to unpack. The next morning, I got up early and caught another Uber back to the resort, hoping, God knows why, that the mood had shifted. Maybe they'd had time to realize how wrong it all was. Maybe today they'd remember who booked this trip. Maybe I'd get a seat at the table. They were already having breakfast when I got there. Laughing, relaxed. Brandon wore a loud Hawaiian shirt and told a story I'd heard him borrow from me years ago. Haley had her sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Jill was feeding Liam bites of fresh mango. No one noticed me walk up. "Hey," I said, trying to sound breezy. "Morning." Jill smiled vaguely. "Oh, Natalie. We didn't know you were coming." "I figured I'd catch up with you all," I said. "What's the plan today?" Rick glanced at Brandon. "We're thinking of hitting the beach." "Maybe the hike later," I nodded. "Should I meet you somewhere?" Haley tilted her head. "Oh well, we thought you'd want to do your own thing." "I paid for the group snorkeling tour," I reminded them quietly. "It's at 2, right?" Brandon chewing. "We might just skip that." "Aaron wants to take Liam to the aquarium instead." I opened my mouth to say something. But what? That I'd spent hours booking things tailored to them? That I knew Rick hated boats but agreed to go because Jill was excited? That I had laminated itineraries printed for everyone, still tucked in my backpack like an idiot? Instead, I said, "Cool. Whatever works." There was no room at the table. Haley gestured toward the pool bar. "They've got great coffee if you want to grab something." I nodded again, then walked away before anyone could say another word. Not that they would have. They were already peeling off toward the beach, towels over shoulders, sunglasses on, like I didn't exist. But instead of heading toward the pool bar or the shuttle stop, I took a quiet left into the resort lobby. The air conditioning hit me like a wall, almost too cold after the heat outside. But it helped. It cleared my head. I stepped up to the reception desk. The same woman from check-in was there. She looked surprised to see me again. "Can I leave something in the hotel safe?" I asked. "Of course." "Would you like to set up a pickup code?" "No," I said. "Just label it for the Fielding family. If I don't show up to breakfast tomorrow, please give it to them." She paused but didn't ask questions, just handed me a security envelope and logged the request. I sealed it, handed it over, and thanked her politely. Outside, I paused near a palm tree and watched my family from a distance. Brandon tried to teach Liam a handstand in the sand. Jill posed for a photo with Rick. Haley sipped from a coconut like a movie extra. They didn't even glance in my direction, but I wasn't waiting for their attention anymore. They had no idea what I'd already done. No idea that back at the motel after their little joke, I'd logged into every booking account and started quietly undoing everything. The inter-island flights, the excursions, the hotel extensions, the catamaran tour Brandon wouldn't shut up about. All of it. Gone. And now, tucked inside the hotel safe was something that would make sure they finally understood exactly what they'd thrown away. I didn't know what would hit harder, the cancellations or the words I left with them, but I could already picture the moment they opened it. The silence, the dawning confusion, and then the screaming. Let them enjoy their sunrise. It was the last free thing they'd get from me. It wasn't just about Hawaii. That's the thing people don't get when they hear stories like this. It never starts with a vacation or a hotel room. It starts years earlier, in the quiet moments where you realize you're not the favorite, not the funny one, not the golden child, just the one who's useful. I was 8 the first time I felt it. Brandon accidentally knocked over my Lego tower, a really complicated one I'd spent a week building. He laughed, said it was stupid, and walked away. When I told Mom, she barely looked up from the dishes. "Don't be dramatic, Natalie. He's younger than you. Just build another one. That was the template." Brandon breaks it. I rebuild it. He forgets something. I remember it. He spends too much. I quietly pay the bill. And every time I asked for even the smallest acknowledgement, I got a pat on the shoulder and a reminder to be the bigger person. So, I became the bigger person. When Dad left, I stepped up. I helped Rick move in when Mom remarried. I made flashcards with Brandon for his algebra final. I let him borrow my car. I covered the Uber bill that night he got blackout drunk and lost his wallet. I didn't complain, not once, because I honestly believed that's what family did. And I think, in some small way, I thought if I kept doing the right thing, they'd eventually see me. Like really see me. Not just the helpful daughter, not just the polite one who remembered birthdays and sent thank you cards, but someone they were proud of. But every time I brought up something I wanted, moving out of state, traveling, maybe switching careers, it was always the same look from Mom. Worry and confusion, like I'd just told her I wanted to become a magician. But who would help with Brandon if something came up? What about your sister-in-law's doctor's appointment? You promised to drive her. You're the stable one. You're not like Brandon. He's sensitive. That was the word they used to excuse everything. When he yelled at me for forgetting to pack his charger for a weekend trip, sensitive. When he ghosted Haley for 2 weeks early in their relationship, and I had to lie to her face about why he wasn't texting back, sensitive. When he crashed his car after leaving a bar and called me instead of the police, sensitive. But me? I was solid. A rock. Natalie always handles things. The truth is, I didn't mind helping. Not at first. I like being dependable. I like being the person people trust. But it started to chip away at me when I realized it wasn't love holding that structure together. It was expectation, obligation, guilt. Like when I paid for Erin's moving truck after her ex left and she cried, saying I was the only one who'd been there for her, then didn't invite me to her son's birthday because there weren't enough chairs. Or when Mom called me in the middle of a work meeting because she needed help disputing a medical bill, then forgot to call back for my birthday a week later. Or when Brandon said he was proud of me for once, the day I got promoted, and in the same breath asked if I could lend him rent money. The Hawaii trip wasn't just about giving them something nice. It was a test, a question I wasn't brave enough to ask out loud. If I gave them everything, would they finally treat me like I mattered? And now, I had my answer. When I got back to the motel after breakfast that second day, I sat on the end of the bed and stared at the receipt for the Royal Sands Motel. I had paid for that too. Of course I had. It wasn't part of the original plan, but I picked up the cost when I was redirected there. Why wouldn't I? That's what I do. I stared at the $186.72 and felt the kind of quiet fury that doesn't show on your face. It just settles deep into your bones. That's when I opened my laptop, logged in, pulled up the travel itinerary I knew better than my own work calendar. I canceled the snorkeling tour, canceled the inter-island flights to Maui, canceled the helicopter ride Mom had said was too much, but secretly bragged about to her church group, canceled the rental car I'd reserved for Brandon and Haley's day trip. Then I logged into my email and removed every saved traveler profile except my own. I sent a short message to the resort's billing office requesting my card be removed from the account for any future incidentals. It felt like shutting off switches in a house I no longer lived in. Later that night, I walked past the resort again, not to spy, just to see if I could feel anything. Anger, regret, jealousy. Instead, I felt clarity. They sat by the pool, laughing, drinking. Brandon held court, of course, telling a story that may or may not have actually happened. Jill was wrapped in a shawl, Rick's arm around her shoulder, both of them glowing in the soft light. I could have been in that photo, but I wasn't. I stood there for a moment, visible to no one, just like always. Then I turned and walked back toward the road. Not back to the motel. Not just yet. I wasn't done. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to let them walk right into it. Let them sip their cocktails and plan their perfect day. Let them think I was still licking my wounds in a budget motel. What they didn't know was that the rug was already gone beneath their feet. And when they opened that envelope, well, I hoped the screaming would be loud enough to reach the shoreline. The first message came in at 9:12 a.m. the next day. Hey, Natalie, are you around? We're not seeing your name on the Catamaran manifest. Did you cancel the tour? It was from Aaron, polite, confused, still hopeful that maybe this was just a mix-up. I didn't respond. At 9:24, Brandon called. I watched the screen light up once, twice, declined. At 9:28, a group text lit up. Brandon. Sis, did you cancel our helicopter ride? I put the phone face down on the nightstand and poured myself another cup of motel coffee. Burnt, bitter, perfect. I imagined the moment they opened the envelope. The resort staff would have handed it over sometime after breakfast, just like I asked. Someone probably shrugged, said, "Weird, maybe she left a thank you note," and ripped it open without thinking. And then the video would start. Just me sitting on the motel bed, framed neatly, calm as ever. Hi, if you're watching this, you already know something's wrong. The rest of your trip has been canceled. Flights, excursions, hotel extensions, gone. Charges removed. Plans erased. Before you ask why, let me save you the time. You booked me in a motel an hour away because you didn't want me around. You made jokes about how I paid but wasn't part of the family. You thought I'd stay quiet like I always do, but not this time. Enjoy the rest of your stay on your own dime. Don't worry, I left the sunrise. It's the only thing here that's free, cut to black. No yelling, no accusations, just a polite nuclear bomb. By 10:01 a.m., my phone had 14 missed calls, 3 voicemails, and 1 absolutely unhinged wall of texts from Brandon. Natalie, this isn't funny. Natalie, you're being a psycho. Natalie, grow up. You embarrassed Mom. You ruined the whole trip for everyone. What the hell is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? Let's see. 10 years of unpaid emotional labor, 5 years of financial handouts, and 1 Hawaii trip where I was dumped in a roadside motel like luggage they didn't want to bring inside. Yeah, I guess I snapped. By 10:34, Jill called. I didn't answer, but I played the voicemail later. Her voice trembled. Natalie, sweetheart, I don't know what happened. I thought you were happy to have your own space. We didn't mean to make you feel left out. Can we please talk? You're scaring me. I almost laughed at that part. Scaring her. I'd been ghosted, gaslit, and guilt-tripped by these people my entire life. But now she was scared because I'd finally stopped smiling through it. Rick texted shortly after. Come on, let's be reasonable. You didn't have to go nuclear. That's rich coming from the guy who stood next to his wife while she pretended I didn't exist at breakfast. Around noon, things escalated. The resort billing office emailed me to confirm my card had been removed and the family had been notified. The remaining charges would now be billed directly to their rooms, if they could provide valid payment, which, according to another message from Aaron, was a problem. Why would you do this? None of us brought extra cards because you said you covered everything. Liam is crying. We can't even go to the aquarium today. I didn't respond, but I did laugh. Then I checked the comments on Brandon's Instagram post from the night before, the one with him shirtless on the beach captioned Vacation Mode On. Someone had commented, Sis didn't even pay for her own hotel. El Mao. Another, Imagine being so trash your sister cancels your trip midweek. Apparently someone at the resort, maybe a staff member, maybe a guest, had shared the story online. A short TikTok titled, When the Family Freeloader Finally Gets Cut Off. It was already blowing up. By evening, the texts had taken a sharp turn from outrage to desperation. Haley, we're locked out of the second room. They said the card was declined. Jill, Natalie, please. We didn't think it would hurt you like this. Rick, come back and talk to us. We can fix this, Brandon. You're dead to me. Seriously, no one wants you in this family anymore. This is why you're alone. Ah, there it was. The last card in the deck. You're alone. As if I didn't already know. As if I hadn't felt that every time they laughed without me, planned without me, lived like I was a background character in their main story. But here's the thing Brandon never understood. I might be alone, but I wasn't lonely. Not anymore. Because loneliness is sitting across from your own mother while she thanks your brother for bringing everyone together. When you booked the entire trip. Loneliness is realizing no one saved you a seat at breakfast. No one even noticed you weren't there. Solitude. Solitude is peace. I flew out that night. Window seat. No one beside me. I ordered a drink and watched the islands disappear below, green and gold and beautiful in the dying light. They were still there somewhere, scrambling to figure out who would foot the bill, still yelling, still pointing fingers, still wondering how things had gone so wrong. And the best part? They didn't even know it yet. But this wasn't just a vacation ruined. It was the end of the old arrangement. No more quiet support. No more monthly transfers. No more co-signing loans or covering for missed rent. No more picking up the pieces. I was done. And when they got home, credit cards maxed, flights rebooked, bills unpaid, stories spreading, I hoped it hit hard. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be there to catch them when they fell. The silence lasted 2 days. I thought maybe that was it. Maybe they were so stunned, so embarrassed, they'd just disappear. That would have been fine. Better than fine, actually. Clean, simple. But no, day 3, the spin machine kicked in. It started with a post on Brandon's Instagram story. Some people wait their whole lives to ruin one vacation. Hope it was worth it, yeah, sis. Then a cryptic Facebook update from Jill. Families aren't perfect, but we grow stronger through love, not cruelty. And then came the full PR tour. Haley wrote a long, carefully worded email to a handful of extended relatives. Yes, she CC'd people. She framed it like a tragic misunderstanding. Natalie felt excluded due to a booking issue and reacted by canceling our entire trip without warning. It was heartbreaking. We're still trying to process the trauma. I guess spending 3 nights in a mid-tier chain hotel near the airport was too much for the system because, yes, that's how their dream vacation ended. They'd tried to stay at the original resort, confident someone would eventually cover the charges. Brandon told the front desk, "She's our sister. She'll fix it." As if I were a misplaced towel service, not the woman who quietly shut the door behind them. But the staff was ready. My name was off the reservation. My card was gone. They had everything in writing. 2 rooms were locked by noon. Resort security escorted them to the lobby with luggage still unzipped. They were offered the option to pay out of pocket. They couldn't, so they checked out. They spent the final 3 nights of their vacation in one room with 2 double beds and a rollaway cot at a hotel near the airport with no beach access and lukewarm breakfast eggs. I know this because a resort staffer, someone who watched the whole thing unfold, emailed me privately just to say, "We were all rooting for you." Apparently, the screaming really was loud enough to reach the shoreline. They skipped the remaining excursions. Never made it to Maui. The catamaran tour Brandon bragged about? Gone. Aaron cried in the lobby when they canceled Liam's aquarium visit after trying to guilt the ticket clerk into letting them in for free. When it was time to go home, reality hit harder. I had also canceled the return flights. They had to scramble at the airport, paying last-minute fares with whatever cards still worked. Haley's was declined twice. Rick ended up covering most of it with a credit card he said was only for emergencies. Turns out losing your free vacation midweek because you alienated the person funding it qualifies. By the time they landed, the story had already gone viral. Someone at the resort posted that short TikTok. When the family freeloader finally gets cut off, a clip of Brandon yelling in the lobby, a blurry shot of Jill crying, one of Haley storming off while holding 2 inflatable pool floats. 500,000 views in under 48 hours. The comment section was brutal. Protect Natalie at all costs. This is why you never bite the hand that pays for the helicopter tour. Plot twist. Natalie wasn't the quiet one. She was the loaded gun. Then came the real desperation. Back home, they realized the damage wasn't confined to Hawaii. I had canceled all ongoing support. The monthly money I sent Jill? Gone. The just-in-case savings account Brandon had access to? Closed. The shared Costco membership I'd been paying for? Revoked. I sent one final email. Simple. Final. Effective immediately, I am no longer providing financial or logistical support to any member of this family. Please do not contact me unless it's through a lawyer. They didn't take that well. Rick sent me a screenshot of a credit card bill with a passive-aggressive text. Your mother's really struggling. Any chance you could help? For her sake? I didn't reply. Brandon posted a photo of him and Jill looking sad at a diner, captioned, "Family is supposed to forgive." The comments backfired again. A friend of mine wrote, "Didn't you brag about ditching your sister in a motel? Good luck with that forgiveness tour." And then they went full scorched earth. They called around to mutual friends and extended family trying to plant the story that I'd overreacted, that I'd always been emotionally unstable, that the whole thing was part of a long pattern of control. It might have worked if I hadn't already released the video. I uploaded the original clip, the one I left in the hotel safe, just slightly edited for context. No commentary, just facts. A calm voice, a clear message. You didn't want me around. Now you're on your own. The internet took care of the rest. Some of their friends stopped calling. Jill lost her part-time bookkeeping gig. Someone who saw the video didn't want drama tied to their small business. Aaron's ex used the situation to argue for full custody, citing emotional instability and public embarrassment. Brandon tried to go on a podcast to share his truth. It got 4 views and 2 dislikes. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I booked a trip to Kyoto, just me. No guilt, no group chat. I walked under cherry blossoms, ate noodles in alleyway shops, and slept better than I had in years. I started building a new life, a smaller circle, but peaceful. People who liked me because I was kind, not because I was convenient. For the first time, I wasn't the support beam in a collapsing building. I was just free. The last message I ever got from Jill came 2 months later. I know you hate us. I just wish you'd remember we're still your family. I stared at it for a long time, then typed one line that used to mean something and hit send. It's been 9 months since the trip. Without my support, things unraveled fast. My mom and Rick struggled almost immediately. Turns out I'd been quietly keeping their budget afloat more than anyone realized. He picked up gig work to cover what used to come from me. She stopped answering calls from relatives after a few awkward conversations about how things went in Hawaii. Brandon burned through his last emergency fund within weeks. Haley moved in with her sister just until things stabilize, and he tried crowdfunding his way out of rent trouble. It didn't go well. One of the top comments read, "Maybe don't ditch the woman paying for your vacation next time." Aaron tried to get a loan co-signed. No one in the family would touch it. Last I heard, she was working retail and back living with her mom. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I just moved on. Turns out peace is quiet and affordable, especially when you stop paying for everyone else's chaos. But now I'm wondering, was I right to finally draw the line, or did I go too far? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe.